So thank you, everyone. Thank you, Neil. Thank you, Portal to Ascension, for having me on today. Today is a very special day. Every day, of course, that we wake up on this planet is a special day, but we could say that today is a more special day than usual. If we look at the astrology of today, there's a very significant event occurring. We have Pluto, the outermost planet, but the most powerful planet in astrology, making a station phase literally today. Pluto has stationed at 29 degrees and 38 minutes of Capricorn. Now, some of you may be saying, Capricorn, wait, I thought Pluto was an Aquarius, right? It was, and it has retrograded back into Capricorn for the final time for the next 3 centuries, friends, the next 3 centuries. This is it. So Pluto is stationed today. It will be pretty much stationed for the next couple of days. For all intents and purposes, when I look at charts, I kind of look at, okay, when is the next minute that it enters? When will it enter 29 degrees and 39 minutes? By the way, seeing a comment here that was smooth. I mean, what do you get when you get 3 professionals at the art of speaking all at once? You get smooth segues. So I'm not surprised, and neither should you be. 29 degrees, 38 minutes. When it moves to 29 degrees, 39 minutes, it will then be moving in forward motion. After the U.S. elections, as we enter mid-November, it will ingress into Aquarius for the final time in this cycle, and we'll be there for the next 20 years. We had a little preview of Pluto and Aquarius earlier this year before it went back into Capricorn. We had an earlier preview last year for a period of a couple months. And whenever Pluto changes signs, it's a major transition point for the planet. And I'm going to talk about not just how it's a transition point for planet Earth, but how it's also a major transition for us as individuals. So first for the planet, right? What does it mean? Well, Capricorn is about structure. Capricorn and Aquarius are so interesting because they're so diametrically opposed in a way, even though they share qualities. Any signs that are right next to each other will also share some qualities with one another, right? But Capricorn being about structure, being ruled by Saturn, right? Capricorn is in charge of a top-down structure. And the way that our society, not just here in the United States or Canada, but all Western societies and really all governments on this planet, how are they structured? They're structured in a top-down matter of rule, where you have different levels of influence, right? And as you go up a chain of influence, and every step above has more influence and usually more information as well than the steps below. And this top-down structure is, if we root it back to the most recent cycle that our solar system and our planet, when it was in the photon belt, and the photon belt is this area of increased light that we enter into at specific points in our solar system's cycle, and we can divide it really into 26,000 year cycles. And we are at that 0 point, if you will. We are at that culmination point, both the beginning and the end of the old cycle and the beginning of a new 26,000 year cycle. That's really what was meant by the end of the Mayan calendar in 2012, was that it was the end of this 26,000 year cycle and the beginning of a brand new cycle. And really, we could, it's hard to say when exactly is the delineation point of that 26,000 year cycle. One could say it was as early as the harmonic convergence of 1987. One could say that it hasn't even happened yet, right? Same for, when is that delineation point between the planetary age of Pisces and the planetary age of Aquarius? Remember, when we talk about planetary ages, it's retrograde. And same, was it 1987? Was it 2000? Was it 2012? Was it 2020? Is it 2024? Is it 2043? Is it 2140? Regardless, we're in this about 200-year kind of segue. We're in this 200-year bridge between the ages and between the end of a cycle and the beginning of a new cycle. Now, we enter into the photon belt, which is this area of increased light at the center of the galaxy, twice each cycle, at the end of the cycle and mid-cycle. Mid-cycle was 13,000 years ago, and you guessed it, that was Atlantis and Lemuria. So this top-down structure that we've been used to as far as the way that governments operate on this planet, not just governments, think about the way corporations operate, think about the way public schools operate. Almost all organizations operate with this top-down structure, which is Capricornian and Saturnian in nature. Where does that root from in our modern era? It roots from Atlantis. So it's an Atlantean structure, and there's nothing wrong with it per se. And it's not something that will just never happen again in the new Earth. It's just something that will become less relevant as we transition. And when I say will, I don't mean in the next year. I don't even mean in the next 5 years or even in the next 10 or 15 years. This is a very long-term process, this evolutionary process and the ascension process of planet Earth. However, we will get to a point eventually when we are really living in the new Earth, and that Capricornian, Saturnian top-down structure has in general transformed into a concentric circular structure, if you will, which is Aquarian in nature. If you think about Aquarius, Aquarius is the water bearer, sometimes traditionally has been portrayed, depicted as a man pouring water, and sometimes as a woman pouring water. But if you think about the image of the water bearer pouring water, right? The water bearer is both taking water and pouring it. And remember, Aquarius is an air sign. Aquarius is about communication. But there is that connection with the depiction, the glyph of the water bearer and water. And think about what happens when you have an undisturbed pool of water or an undisturbed lake, and you take some water and pour it, right? You create concentric circles. And that's the Aquarian ideal of how society is structured. Concentric circles of influence, okay? How will that eventually, and again, this is way in the future, but eventually, how will that kind of look and feel? Well, let's take, our country, I'm in the US for example, right? We have the underlying, in a way, it's kind of interesting. We already have the underlying structure of that because you have town governments, you have city governments, you have county governments, state governments, and then the federal government, right? So in that sense, like that feature of the Aquarian ideal of the way I see it and the way the ETs tell me about it, right? About how we will be ruled as societies and how we will rule one another, essentially, or rule ourselves, really, is more reality of it. It's the seedlings have been there for forever during this Capricornian time, but it's just a transition from that the locality and the local rule that is in this pyramidal structure to councils that are simply councils of equals. This is how the Pleiadians manage their societies. This is how we manage our societies, those of us that were in Lemuria. Councils of people of equal power and influence, right? Now, Pluto right now, as I said, is stationed. So Pluto is super exalted, okay, right now, and it will be over the next week. Pluto is the planet of power. So Pluto represents all of the misuse of power on this planet. And it is not even remotely difficult to find everyday examples, every single day of those that are in power in politics, in corporations, in media, and in entertainment, and so on and so forth, in the medical world, so on and so forth. that abuse their power for influence and money, right? And everything that comes along with influence and money. All of the things that the ego really loves that come along with influence and money. And that Pluto rules over that, right? So the Pluto is kind of has this role in holding this Saturnian pyramidical structure in place, because the reason people want to get up a higher echelons and ladders of that pyramidical structure is because of the Plutonian draw, the magnetism of power itself, right? The downfall of Atlantis and Lemuria was Pluto in astrology. The downfall of Atlantis and Lemuria was the Plutonian greed and desire for power. That's it. The downfall of Atlantis and Lemuria began in Atlantis. It began Atlantis for a time, if you didn't know, was a very high level functioning society, functioning with peace. Everyone living on the continent for a time was very affluent and was living in peace. There were no battles, there were no wars, and there was little political conflict. As we started to move more towards the final stage of the age of Leo here on this planet, which, as I said, ended 13,000 years ago at the mid-cycle, we started to kind of spiral downward. And not just in Atlantis, later in Lemuria, and in other continents on the planet as well. And the beginning of that spiral downward, although astrologically it was always meant to be, was those in Atlantis, some deciding that just being affluent and living in peace wasn't enough. That one needed to be in a place of power and influence that was greater than one's peers. Pluto and that desire for power and influence is the downfall of all societies. We can think of so many, not just like Shakespearean plays, but movies and historical stories of power being one's downfall, and being the downfall, hubris and power being the downfall of an entire society, right? Well, this is what happened in Atlantis. You got these factions, different groups that began competing to not just rule over their followers, but a desire to rule the entire continent of Atlantis. And then eventually this perverted idea to rule over the entire planet, right? Which all dictators throughout history and all wannabe dictators, right? This is ultimately what's in their psychopathic, narcissistic minds, is they want to rule over the entire planet. And that's exactly what happened in Atlantis. And then you have these big groups with big ideals and big egos at the top, right? All of a sudden saying, no, I'm going to elbow out every other group. And then eventually you have war, right? And the war began between these factions. It was a civil war in Atlantis. That's how the destruction of the planet began. And eventually it extended out to Lemuria, because these groups decided, well, while we're at it, right? Like so many examples in history, you know, a country invades another country and they say, well, while we're at it, while our military is doing what it's doing and we're sacrificing all our young people, let's invade another country as well, right? That's been the danger with a particular country over the past couple of years, hasn't it been? You know, luckily it really hasn't happened. And okay, that's what happened with Atlantis. And Atlantis said, all right, well, we're going to also invade Lemuria, right? And the Lemurians had little power to fight back because they had not been adequately prepared for that. Only at the end did they start to train, their citizens in military expeditions. Before that, and I say us because I was in Lemuria and so many of you were in Lemuria. So many of you were in Lemuria and Atlantis, right? But in Lemuria, for almost the entire length of that civilization, we were peaceful people. We wanted nothing to do with politics. We wanted nothing to do with war. The way that we ruled our society in Lemuria, we had different states, like we do in the United States, like you do provinces in Canada, right? We had different states, but it was this rule, this Aquarian rule of concentric circles, right? You would have a small council of usually 6 to 8 that would be in charge of a local community of maybe 100 people. And when I say in charge, it wasn't like they were making rules. They were listening to the concerns of all the people of the community. What do the farmers need more of? What do the children need more of? What do the animals need more of, right? How can we live with zero waste? How can we live without causing any unnecessary strife amongst ourselves? Anytime there would be some sort of major, issue, some sort of major point of consternation between one family and another, it would be brought to the council, and the council would sit down with both families, would bring in experts, would bring in the spiritual leaders of the community, someone like myself, to mediate. And through that, it was everything was done through discourse, listening, and mediation. How much does your government actually listen to you? Right? You laugh. Almost zero, right? But we will get there. And the way we get there, by the way, during this bridge period of Pluto and Aquarius, is we have to demand what we want. And that part of this bridge of Pluto and Aquarius is the massive and intense proliferation of technology. If you think, right, I joke because I always like to stay a bit behind in technology. That's just who I am. I have an iPhone 8, okay? It's small, it fits in my pocket. It doesn't emit that much EMF radiation compared to the new ones. I'm fine with it, okay? But I will say last night I was down at the lake trying to take photos of the Aurora Borealis, and my iPhone 8 is absolutely no match to the new iPhone 14s or 15s or whatever. So yes, they do work better, but for now I'm content with my little old iPhone 8. But if you think technology has gotten advanced, right, and if you think technology has taken over our lives, wait 5 years, wait 10 years, wait 20 years. Okay, we have not even touched where we're going. There is a principle of technological evolution that is logarithmic, actually, right? And we are at that inflection point right now. We're just about to shoot up logarithmically. Okay. So as a part of that, yeah, not just the iPhones and the Androids, but technology in general will be more a part of who we are. It will be uncommon for someone to not, just I'd say probably 5 years from now, it will be uncommon if you don't have, whatever the new iteration of the Apple Watch is, right? Which interfaces with your body. And eventually it'll get to a point of telepathic interface with the Apple Watch or with whatever you're using, right? And it'll begin with verbal, and then it'll become telepathic, and we'll become more integrated with technology. And a lot of us will reject that. I might be one of those that rejects that. It'll be akin to like 5 years from now. And I'd love to come back to this 5 years, see if I was right. But 5 years from now, not having like some sort of device that you're wearing on you will be akin to, not just me with my little iPhone 8, but like a flip phone. You know what I mean? Like if I was still walking around with a T-Mobile flip phone with, 3 minutes after 9, right? And then who knows where it goes from there even, right? Eventually, a lot of people will actually clamor for and want to have actual devices in them, like in their skin and not just on them, that will interface with, eventually, of course, people will be able to pay with something that's within them, microchip or whatever. They'll be able to manage all of their things. And then eventually they'll be able to actually create a holographic screen using one of these devices. That's where it's all going. And no one's on, if you don't want it, you don't want it. I don't want it. I don't want to go that far. this is about as far as I need to go. The iPhone 8, I'm good, right? But most of Western society will go in that direction. But although that, in a way, may be the dark side of Pluto and Aquarius, and of course, it's not all dark. Every astrology teaches us that there is no right or wrong. There is no good or bad. It just is different manifestations of and different results of what the planets are doing and what the transits are doing, right? But aside from that, another exciting feature is the proliferation of, if you think social media right now is integrated with our lives, which it so is. Most of us have become so addicted to just like you wake up in the morning and what is the first thing you're doing? You're scrolling, right? 20 years ago, we didn't do that. When you had your T-Mobile flip phone, you couldn't, right? What are you going to do? You're going to lay in bed and you're going to take the time to dial okay. You remember how hard it was to text? You have to go like four. Okay, I got the C out, and then we're going to eight. Okay, got the A out, right? It took an hour to text one message. So, that's why I was like, yeah, call me after 9 when my minutes are free, right? But nowadays we wake up and immediately we're interfacing with technology. We're interfacing with social media. The last thing we do before we go to bed, we're interfacing with technology, right? Well, that's going to become even more, right? It will be rare eventually for even people of the older generation. Think about it, because the older generations continue to change, right? And, people that were not of the older generation 20 years later, they are. And eventually, almost everyone in the world will have some sort of social media presence, right? Almost everyone will be engaged into this interweb, this interfacing proxy that is social media. And with that, there's, of course, the dark side of disinformation and misinformation is that anything that anyone in power would want the people of a particular place or the planet itself to believe, it's very easy to influence. But there's at the same time a counterforce. There's a counterforce that comes as a result of that. The time we taught that are being talked about now. This experience of this hurricane season, right? These hurricanes are brutal, and I've been looking out, and nervous for all my friends that are in hurricane zones. But at the same time, it's brought this discourse to the table about weather, hasn't it? Right? It's it's not that it's what creates these things, but it's an aspect of what can potentially strengthen them, right? And that discourse has been brought to the table, and that discourse hasn't been brought to the table in a mainstream way before this. It hasn't, right? It's an example of how the counterforce of this Pluto and Aquarius social media proliferation that is just going to will allow this counterforce of the people themselves being able to actually understand the types of things going on in the world that have been hidden from them. Not weather modification, but I'm talking about alien influences, right? Why have we been, for the most part, gaslit by governments over the past century about the existence of extraterrestrials, right? Why? Well, because there's something there we need to know, isn't there, right? So everything that has been hidden, Pluto is about truth. Pluto is about truth. So this Pluto and Aquarius age is going to be about that truth all finally coming up to the surface, and it comes through the vehicle of the internet and social media as this counterforce. And at the same time, you will see the tech companies and the social media companies clamp down harder and harder and harder with censorship. And this is what astrology teaches us about the opposing forces. Neither is good or bad. It just is. It just is the experience that it's meant to be. So it's an exciting time. And today, tomorrow, you can just look around your virtual world. I don't think it's any mistake that Neil, our wonderful founder, right, has created this, scheduled this summit to be happening right now with Pluto stationing, right? Because this is it's the doorway, the it's the preview. The preview. That's the word I was looking for, right? When you go to see a movie, and the sneak previews, right? It's a sneak preview of what we're going to be experiencing as a planet for the next 20 years. And it's very, very exciting. Now, on a personal level, Pluto is associated with karma. Okay. Pluto and Saturn are the two planets that are most associated with karma. Saturn is going to be in charge of the stuff that happened in past lives that it was either so traumatic, or on the other side, it was so triumphant. It was so exuberant, and it was such an experience of accomplishment that remains in your energy field throughout subsequent lifetimes, right? If you look back at the history of your life, right? What do you remember? And I'm serious. What do you remember? Like, just that question alone, what do you remember about your life right now? The images going through my head are experiences and exciting moments. I'm seeing myself walking in the desert in Jordan, and it must have been in 2000 and I don't even remember 9. I don't even remember 2009 maybe. I think it was that year, walking in the desert in Jordan, all alone, right? Walking up to going and hiking up a mountain, and underneath the mountain there's a woman, and she's living all alone. Arab woman living all alone with her goats, her pigs, her cattle, no one else, just her. Washing her clothes in one of those old-fashioned, washboard things, right? Hanging them out to dry. Having this wooden well where she would store water, right? Living all alone in the middle of the desert. And the juxtaposition between her and me, this, 20-some-year-old crazy kid traveling the world, listening to Green Day in my headphones, right? With my iPhone, with my Mets baseball hat, representing a sports team that's a giant corporation, right? And there I am with all my corporate stuff, face to face with this woman who's living in the old world and has never been indoctrinated by the new world, right? And we're like at the end of that cycle of there still being, there was a story that came out recently about an Amazonian tribe in Brazil that got Elon Musk's Starlink. And the tribe had never before been, had access to the internet. And immediately all the young kids started just, looking at porn, right? Of course, not kids, but, the teenage boys and the 20-some boys. And, they immediately got on Facebook. They immediately got on Instagram, right? They immediately started watching violent YouTube videos that they never seen before. And, R-rated movies. And the elders you can read about this, and the elders of the tribe became immediately very concerned about the influence of this Starlink. And they put rules into place for the village that, they could only use internet during a certain period during the daytime, right? Because of the type of influence they were seeing and have on their village. And they were noticing that it would separate people. They would no longer, spend time with each other as they normally did. They noticed that it started to make, the boys more violent as well, right? And it's just fascinating. We're at the end of that period of this planet where there's still untouched people. There still will be for a little bit longer, but because of Elon Musk's Starlink, actually, we're at the end of that, right? And it's just like when you think back about the memories of your life, You remember the really significant things. You don't remember the mundane things. And Pluto is in charge, Pluto and Saturn. I was saying Saturn. Saturn is in charge of those things within you that are so poignant, that are so powerful, good or bad, carried over from other lifetimes, that they're still with you in your energy field in this lifetime, and you will re-experience them in some way in this life. Pluto is in charge of the deepest, deepest wounds, and especially wounds around power. And I want you to ask yourself, what is my relationship with power in this life? What is my relationship with power? Part of the ascension process, especially for those like myself, who has Pluto really powerfully in my chart. I'm very Plutonian in nature if you look at my chart. Especially for those of you with really poignant, powerful Pluto and Scorpionic placements. What is your relationship with power? And a lot of you, if you look deep within, I have fully stemmed my power. And a lot of you, if you look within, I'm terrified of power. I feel like power deep down in my subconscious, my unconscious, is going to be like that mural in the Denver airport, where it's the Nazi looking guy with a boot about to step on, a child's head. That's a very Plutonic mural if you've ever seen that at DIA. Innumerable aspects to it. One, and we really, in order to ascend, we have to come to a place of alchemy with every planet in our chart, every planet that influences us. And as we're talking about, you have to come to a point of alchemy in this lifetime with the experience of power. So for some of you, what does that mean, practically speaking? It means you've been hiding. You've been hiding too much. The time to hide is over. You have to get out, step out, shoulders back, and say, here I am. Take or leave me. Here I am. For some of you, it's going to be the realization that you've misused your power. Yes, light workers are not immune from misusing power. No, they are not, because now that I've started to be around some of the expos, gatherings, believe you me, there's people in our New Age field that misuse power. It's very common. And there's people in every single industry that misuse power. Every industry, every walk of life. So maybe it's the realization that you misuse power, and that's okay, because we're all learning. And how do you alchemize that? And it's going to be going into that feminine softness that is starting to overtake our planet. That rise of the divine feminine, which is of the shadow masculine. The shadow control Capricornian top-down masculine is being taught by the softness of the divine feminine. The divine feminine representing the And for some of you, it will be the realization that you are powerful, and it's okay. It's okay to be special in a messed up world. It's okay to have special powers in an asleep world. It's okay to be a leader of light, of evolution in a world that wants to stay. So I would just want to really leave you with that today, that this experience of Pluto is reminding us of our relationship with power. And maybe there's some environment. Maybe there's something in your personal world that you need to address to truly step into that power for yourself. And I hear a rustling, and I know that's Victor. And hello, sir.
That's rustling, but you have a few more minutes. Go ahead. Please keep going. You have about 5 more minutes.
No, I think we're just about there. I want to actually bring you in. I'd prefer to actually bring you in.
Well, thank you.
I actually didn't even plan on going. I didn't know where I was going to go today. I just kind of rolled up and said, let's see what comes through. And that was the discourse that I feel I needed to bring through today, was about discussion around Pluto and power. But where are you with that? What are your...
Well, let me ask you a question. As you know, as we've shared before with my sun sign, my sun is in Capricorn. My moon is in Aquarius, and I have Cancer rising. But with my sun in Capricorn and Pluto entering Capricorn, how is that going to affect me?
Well, we have to remember that Pluto is an extremely slow-moving planet, okay? So anyone, go ahead and you can pull up your natal chart, okay? And you can look at how any transiting planet, what the influence is on your chart by looking at, okay, so Pluto is right in that final degree of Capricorn, and it will be entering Aquarius soon. Where does that fall in your chart? So because Pluto is so slow moving, we only really see major transiting Pluto every decade, really. That's when it'll move about a half of a sign. But when we have experiences like we are having right now, Pluto is exalted because it's stationed. It's going to exalt all of our personal Plutos, especially those of us that have Pluto, like myself. It's conjunct on Venus, for opposite, conjunct, or square a significant planet like your sun, moon, or your ascendant, or it's on your ascendant or your descendant, right? It's going to really, really, really hit you. But it's, I looking at it as a collective experience. It's examining that question around power. And also, by the way, it's not just about power, it's about sexuality as well. It's about, what are your desires in that arena, fulfilling that with your partner, right? Are you feeling that you brought that out of yourself and become as free and comfortable with that, right? Are you desiring partnership? Are you desiring to separate from partnership? That's a huge question right now. Do you know how many people I've talked to over the last couple of weeks that are going through breakups? It's mind-boggling. It's absolutely mind-boggling, right? And it's not just about Pluto station. It really goes back to the Libra eclipse that we just had, the solar eclipse in Libra. Libra is the descendant. Libra is about relationships, partnership, and it's this make or break. Literally the title of my last astrology podcast, which, by the way, go to the Higher Self channel on YouTube. You can check out my new moon, full moon podcast. I've been doing that for 5 years. And it's a make or break point for partnerships where the soul contract, and the soul contract being ruled by Saturn, the soul contract is saying, okay, we've reached this inflection point and we are ready to go in different directions. Over the next couple of months, it's going to happen if it hasn't happened already. And for those partnerships, what's written in the soul contract is a long-term relationship. This period, whatever comes up, whatever truth has to be spoken, right? Whatever truth has to be discussed in the context of the relationship will serve to strengthen and solidify. There was this beautiful grand trine on this most recent eclipse between Venus and Scorpio, grand water trine, which is very emotional. Venus and Scorpio, Mars and Cancer, and Saturn retrograde in Pisces. And that Saturn piece of it, a grand trine is about stability. And that Saturn piece was creating this stability for those relationships that are meant for stability, but also it through the context of opening up the Pandora's box of karma that hasn't yet been fully dealt with between the two partners that will then have to be. And then the Mars and Cancer is about the emotions felt through that. And the Venus in Scorpio is about the truth and the passion, right? When I think about like fifth dimensional new age marriages and relationships, to me, the benchmark of it, the foundation is truth and desire. There's so many stagnant marriages and relationships where that desire has been lost. And as a byproduct, the truth is not there anymore. The emotional experience is no longer truthful. And you know what happens, sadly, to a lot of people that are in long-term relationships, marriages like that for decades, the body will then reflect it eventually. Whether it's cancer, or whether it's Alzheimer's, or whether it's something else, the body will end up reflecting that stagnation of the marriage. I've seen it countless times throughout my career and coach people through that and help, where I could. But when, fast forward into this new age, right? It's not just about technology. It's about us as humans and how we relate to one another, because the ascension process, a positive feature of the ascension process, is this ladder up a pyramid. Whereas we go up that ladder, we are conglomerating. We're in a survival mechanism, in a survival mode, to grouping with one another. And it starts with two. And then that two becomes a family. And then that family becomes a community, right? So the foundation of that in the new age is truth and desire. You desire to be in a relationship. You wake up every day and you want to be in that relationship.